A slow Thursday afternoon at Sterling Harbor Trust turned tense over something almost nobody would have blinked at. $9. That was the entire reason a well-regarded branch supervisor decided a weary-looking widower in a rain-stained coat wasn't worth another moment of her attention. Less than 40 minutes later, she was standing under the same crystal chandelier, watching senior executives stride through the revolving doors, because the man she had brushed aside was about to authorize the movement of $81 million out of her branch. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Outside, a cold mist hung over downtown Seattle. Commuters ducked beneath awnings, umbrellas bloomed along Pike Street, and streetcars hissed through the gray. Inside the bank, everything gleamed. The floors were polished stone. A brass clock ticked above the vault door. A soft cello recording floated from speakers hidden in the ceiling. To Desmond Ashford, none of it registered. He had hardly slept. His 8-year-old son, Theo, had woken twice in the night with a fever, and by 6 that morning Desmond had coaxed him into eating toast with a thin scrape of jam before dropping him at his aunt's apartment. He'd kept his voice light the whole way there. The moment the door closed, the lightness drained out of his face. Every dollar counted these days. Ever since his wife, Corinne, had died in a car accident 3 years earlier, Desmond had learned to make a paycheck stretch like taffy. He worked from home as a senior forensic accountant, a job most people couldn't quite picture. It wasn't flashy. His clients were relief agencies, medical charities, and educational trusts that relied on him to trace money, verify records, and shepherd enormous transfers safely. The work paid genuinely well. He simply chose not to spend like it. Years of untangling fraud from crooked bookkeepers had left him wary of appearances, including his own. Most days he drove a dented 15-year-old sedan. The elbows of his coat had gone shiny with wear. His boots had been resoled more than once. People often took him for a man scraping by, and sometimes he let the assumption stand. It cost him nothing. That afternoon, he wasn't at the bank about his own money at all. He had recently been named acting financial steward for the Larkspur Foundation for Children's Medicine, stepping in after its longtime director stepped down for health reasons. 11 months of audits had finally wrapped, and the board had voted to move $81 million to a specialized nonprofit asset manager. Everything had been arranged in advance. All Desmond had to do was confirm a handful of documents, hand over his authorization packet, and set the transfer in motion. Straightforward. Or it should have been. He came in carrying a scuffed canvas satchel instead of a leather briefcase. His umbrella dripped by the door. Near the queue, a nervous college student fumbled a stack of loose forms across the floor. Without a second thought, Desmond crouched to help. "Here," he said, gathering the pages. "You've got 2 that slid under the counter." "Thanks, man," the kid breathed. Anytime. Small kindnesses like that came to him without effort. At the service desk stood Priya Nandakumar. At 41, Priya had earned a name for herself as relentless and precise. District leadership loved her metrics. She skipped lunches, skipped vacations, and expected flawless conduct from every teller under her. But somewhere along the way, precision had curdled into impatience. Her branch had just taken heat from the regional office for missing its wealth account targets, and every morning meeting now revolved around premium clients, upsells, and trimming what leadership called low-value interactions. Priya had started reading customers like line items on a report. She watched Desmond approach. Damp coat, a carabiner of keys clipped to his belt, a canvas bag that had clearly seen a decade. She quietly filed him under fee complaint before he said a word. Without a smile, she asked, "Can I help you?" "I hope so," Desmond replied evenly. "I've got 2 things today. One's a small charge on my personal account. The other is an authorized institutional transfer." She nodded without truly hearing the second part. "Let's start with the personal account." He slid his card across the counter. Priya typed for a moment. "It looks like your checking account was assessed a $9 service adjustment yesterday." "Right. I'd like someone to look at it. I thought my account was exempt from that." "It isn't anymore." "I wasn't told. A digital notice was sent. I never received it." Priya laced her fingers together. "The charge is accurate." "I understand," Desmond said calmly. "Would someone mind confirming it anyway? I may have the account terms wrong." Behind him, a short line had formed. Priya glanced back at it. "Sir, $9 isn't usually something we go back and forth over." I know it's a small amount, he said. Then why press it? He paused. Because the rules should apply the same way to everyone. The answer needled her more than it should have. She took it as a lecture. Instead of pulling in a colleague to verify anything, she exhaled loudly enough for the whole line to catch it. If $9 is causing this much trouble, maybe this isn't the right bank for you. The lobby went quieter. Desmond blinked once. Not angry, just caught off guard. I'm not asking for a handout, he said. I'm asking whether the fee was applied correctly. It was. I'd still like someone to check. I already have. Beside her, a younger teller shifted, plainly uncomfortable, and said nothing. Desmond gently reclaimed his card. All right, he could have argued. Instead, he opened his satchel. In that case, he went on, without a trace of heat, I'd like to move on to my second appointment. Priya barely looked up. What appointment? The institutional transfer, scheduled for 2:30. She frowned. I don't have anything like that. It's under the Larkspur Foundation for Children's Medicine. She typed again. Nothing surfaced, because she was only searching personal bookings. There's nothing here. There should be. There isn't. He drew out a printed confirmation. The regional office set it up last week. She skimmed the top line without reading past the foundation's name. Corporate business is usually handled through a different channel. The instructions sent me to this branch specifically. You'll need to reschedule. I drove across the city in this. I'm sorry. Her tone said otherwise. Somewhere behind him, a customer murmured to his companion. Poor guy? Desmond heard it. He smiled politely regardless. I don't think there's been a mistake, he said. The paperwork is complete. Priya folded her arms. Sir, if $9 is a sticking point, I have a hard time believing we're talking about an $81 million transaction. A couple of people exchanged smirks. One teller stared hard at her keyboard. The comment had gone too far. Desmond didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowly slid out a sealed authorization envelope stamped with the foundation's embossed silver crest and set it gently on the counter. I understand why that sounds far-fetched. Priya let out a short laugh. I'm sure. Would you read the first page? I have other customers. It'll take less than a minute. No. The word came instantly. She turned to the teller beside her. Danielle, can you take the next person, please? The meaning was unmistakable. The conversation was finished. Desmond stood still for a few seconds. No raised voice. No threat. No insult. Just quiet. Then he nodded once. Thank you for your time. He tucked every document back into the satchel with care. As he turned to go, an older man ahead of him dropped a folded newspaper and a bus pass. Desmond crouched, gathered them, and returned them with an easy smile. No rush. Thank you, son, the man said softly. Priya caught the exchange. For a heartbeat, something pulled at the edge of her conscience. Then her desk phone rang, and she walked away without looking back. Desmond didn't leave the bank. He stepped into a quiet cluster of chairs by the window and opened his phone. He scrolled to one contact, Gwendolyn Reyes, Executive Vice President, Sterling Harbor Trust Institutional Division. She had personally spent 4 months coordinating this transfer with the Larkspur board. He pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Desmond, good afternoon. Everything moving along. He glanced once toward the service desk. There seems to be some confusion at the branch. What kind of confusion? No one here recognizes the appointment. A pause. They don't recognize it? No. And the authorization envelope? I wasn't given a chance to present it. Gwendolyn's voice sharpened. Stay right where you are. I don't want to make trouble for anyone. You aren't. Another pause. Please don't leave the building. All right, Desmond said, and ended the call. He settled back into the chair by the tall windows and watched the mist bead and run down the glass while customers came and went. He had no idea that in a little under 10 minutes, 2 black sedans and an SUV would slide up to the front curb, and the ordinary Thursday Priya believed she controlled would become the longest afternoon of her career. Desmond slipped the phone into his coat and watched the rain draw crooked lines down the windows. The lobby had eased back into its usual hum. People waited in line, drawers slid open and shut, a printer chattered, and someone laughed near the lone desks. To everyone else, it was simply another slow Thursday. Only Desmond knew that Gwendolyn Reyes had sounded truly rattled. He had no interest in humiliating anyone. If anything, he hoped she would quietly straighten out the appointment, offer a brief apology, and let the transfer go through without a fuss. Across the floor, Priya was already helping someone new, and her whole manner had shifted. She smiled. She offered a bottle of water. She walked the customer patiently through savings options. Desmond noticed the difference, but he didn't resent her for it. He only wondered how many people had passed through that branch in ordinary clothes and left feeling like furniture. About 8 minutes later, the low murmur of the room changed. Heads turned toward the entrance. Through the glass, 2 black sedans and a dark SUV eased to the curb one after another. The guard by the door straightened his blazer. A receptionist whispered, "Is that someone from headquarters?" The doors parted. In came 2 members of the bank's corporate security team. Behind them walked Gwendolyn Reyes, executive vice president of the institutional division, a slim leather folder under her arm. Beside her strode Marcus Thornton, regional director for the Pacific Northwest. A third executive trailed them carrying binders. Every employee recognized them at once. Priya's practiced smile evaporated. Executives did not simply appear. Marcus scanned the lobby. "Where can I find Mr. Desmond Ashford?" Desmond rose from his chair. "Right here." Gwendolyn crossed straight to him and offered both hands. "I'm so sorry you had to wait. Mr. Ashford, my sincere apologies." Customers glanced at one another. A teller stopped mid-count. "The foundation board is already at the receiving institution," Gwendolyn went on. "They've been waiting on our confirmation for almost 40 minutes. "It's all right," Desmond said. There was some confusion. Gwendolyn's eyes flicked toward Priya. "So I understand." Her voice stayed professional. Nothing sharper, nothing softer. She turned back. "If you're ready, we've set up the executive conference room." Before they moved, Desmond hesitated. "There's one small thing." She nodded. "A $9 service fee." She looked faintly surprised. "You know about that? You mentioned it on the phone. It isn't really about the money." "I know." She smiled gently. "It's about whether the process was followed correctly." "Exactly." Marcus quietly made a note. No one else spoke. The 4 of them disappeared behind the frosted glass of the conference room, and the door clicked shut. Silence rolled across the lobby. Then whispers. An older woman said, under her breath, "Didn't she just tell him this might not be the right bank?" A man beside her nodded. "Heard it myself." Priya replayed every sentence she had spoken, word for word. For the first time all afternoon, a genuine unease settled into her chest. Inside the conference room, the mood was another world entirely. Coffee had already been poured. Legal documents lay squared across the long table. Representatives from the receiving institution joined over a secure video link. Desmond drew out the same worn canvas satchel Priya had scarcely glanced at. Inside were notarized trustee resolutions, board authorizations, identity verifications, federal compliance certifications, transfer instructions, and insurance confirmations. Everything was flawlessly ordered. Gwendolyn smiled. "I've worked with stewards for close to 20 years. She looked at the legal advisor. "I don't think I've ever seen paperwork this clean." Desmond laughed softly. "I've had plenty of practice." For the next 40 minutes, everyone worked in quiet concentration. No speeches, no drama, just professionals completing one of the largest nonprofit transfers the branch had ever seen. When the final authorization code appeared on the screen, Marcus extended his hand. "Congratulations. The transfer of $81 million has officially been initiated." Desmond shook it. "I appreciate everyone's help." No celebration followed. To him, it was never his money. It belonged to thousands of children who counted on the foundation's clinics, research grants, and treatment programs. Safeguarding it was simply his job. Outside the conference room, a second meeting had already begun. Regional Human Resources joined by video. Compliance officers pulled security footage, transaction logs, appointment records, recorded calls, and the branch's customer conduct policies. Priya sat across from Marcus. He spoke calmly. "No one is being disciplined over a transaction." She nodded, hopeful. "This is about professional conduct." She swallowed. Marcus laid 2 printed pages on the table. "The foundation appointment was booked 5 days ago." She looked down. You searched only personal appointments." "I assumed, you assumed." He wasn't angry. His disappointment carried far more weight than anger would have. He read on. "You declined to review official documentation. You commented publicly on a customer's finances. You discouraged further help. You failed to escalate an institutional request." Each line landed heavier than the one before. At last Priya whispered, "I made a mistake." Marcus nodded. "Yes, but the mistake wasn't misreading a schedule." He paused. "It was deciding who deserved respect before you knew a single thing about him." The room went still. Priya stared at the table and understood he was right. Even if Desmond truly had been quibbling over $9, he had still deserved patience. Instead, she had treated him like a nuisance to be cleared from her line. Nearly an hour later, Desmond finished the last of the compliance forms. As he came back into the lobby, several employees greeted him quietly. The young teller who had stood beside Priya hurried over. "I'm so sorry about earlier." Desmond smiled kindly. "You don't owe me anything. I should have said something." He shook his head. "It's hard to speak up with your manager standing right there." She gave a weak smile. "Just remember," he added, "everyone who walks through those doors is carrying something you can't see." The words stayed with her long after he left. Priya came slowly out of the meeting room. Her eyes found his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she walked over. "I owe you an apology." "You don't have to." "I do." She drew a slow breath. "I judged you before I listened. I embarrassed you in front of everyone. I treated $9 like it was a measure of who you are." "It was never about the fee," Desmond said quietly. "I know. It was about being heard." She nodded. "I understand that now." He offered a small smile. "I hope you hold on to it." She had braced for a lecture. Instead, he simply wished her well, and somehow that made the whole thing harder to carry. 2 weeks later, Sterling Harbor Trust finished its internal review. Priya's employment was ended. Not because $81 million had left the branch, since the foundation had every legal right to move its funds. She lost her position because investigators uncovered a documented pattern of dismissive treatment, repeated failures to follow escalation procedures, and multiple breaches of the conduct code. Desmond's case had simply forced the bank to finally examine complaints that had been quietly stacking up for years. The decision stung, but it wasn't sudden. It was the sum of many small choices catching up all at once. The months rolled on. Life settled. Theo's fever faded with the warmer weather. He finished the 3rd grade and became fiercely determined to grow strawberries in a planter on the balcony of their small rental. One Sunday morning, he asked, "Dad, why do you always help people you don't even know?" Desmond smiled as he pressed soil around a seedling. "Because someone helped me once." "When?" "The month after your mom died." He tamped the dirt down. "I was standing at a gas station, doing the math in my head, trying to figure out how much fuel I could actually afford. A woman behind me quietly told the cashier to fill the tank and put it on her card. I never even got her name." Theo thought about that. "So you help people because of her?" "Partly. And partly because kindness doesn't really disappear. It just moves from one person to the next." Theo grinned. "I like that. So do I." A few months later, Desmond received a handwritten letter. The return address caught him off guard. It was from Priya. She wrote that losing her job had forced her to slow down for the first time in years. She had begun volunteering at a neighborhood financial literacy center, helping families understand debt, budgeting, and their rights as customers. Near the end, she wrote, "You probably don't remember every word you said that afternoon. I remember all of them. You reminded me that respect should never depend on the size of someone's balance. Thank you for meeting my arrogance with grace instead of anger." Desmond folded the letter carefully and tucked it inside the same worn canvas satchel that had started everything. Not as a memento of someone else's failure, but as proof that people really can grow after their most painful mistakes. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and share it with someone who still believes kindness matters. Comment kindness still exists if you believe even a single good act can change a life. Sometimes a life doesn't turn on millions of dollars. Sometimes it turns because someone finally learns that every person deserves the same respect, whether they're asking about $9 or safeguarding 81 million. That lesson costs nothing at all, and it's worth more than any figure printed on a bank statement.